But these two perspectives are, broadly speaking, we could call the defined or conceptual perspective and the ultimately indefinable, inconceivable perspective. And of course, the one we're very familiar with is the defined perspective. That seems to be the view that humanity, by and large, is just taken for granted, that we're encountering all these phenomena, and we have names for, certainly quite a bit of the phenomena being encountered, and act as if this is the world that we live in. These apparently nameable, describable, definable phenomena. I mean, it really is largely just assumed to be true. That's reality. It's really interesting to explore how that is not the entire story of what's being encountered here experientially. If we think about our ability to seemingly name and categorize and define phenomena, whether they're what we might call external objects, phenomenal objects, or internal ones, subjective states, let's say, that ability to name what's appearing, to identify what's appearing, actually rests upon, we could say, pattern recognition would be one way to describe it. What are we seeing? What are we hearing? What are we seeming to know and encounter, and so on, are something that is identifiable, hence nameable, describable, and so on. And if we look in the night sky and we see what looks like some sort of pattern that resembles something in the natural world, in our world, we call it, the Big Dipper, that looks like a particular configuration of lights that resemble something, right? So we call it the Big Dipper, or any other, say, constellation in the night sky. And it's a pattern, right? And when we encounter something that we seem to know, there's some familiarity with that pattern. It's like, oh yeah, I've seen that before, hence I have knowledge of what it is, knowledge of that pattern, and thereby I'm able to know what it is, describe it, define it, and so on, name it. But here's the really wild thing, which is so obvious if we look, and yet largely overlooked, largely not appreciated in terms of the reality of it and the implications of it. And that is that whatever you seem to be recognizing right now and having names for, in other words, the patterns that are occurring right now in your, if you will, inner and outer experience, are constantly changing. So, you can look at the Big Dipper in the sky and it appears like it's, holding still. And that's how the pattern can be recognized, right? In other words, if it was just constantly changing, what pattern would you recognize? In other words, it's like the frame is holding still long enough to recognize, there it is, there's the pattern. And this is how we tend to imagine life is. Recognizable patterns that are holding still long enough to recognize them as identifiable patterns that we then give names to: fear, joy, sorrow, pleasure, pain, computers, trees, birds, clouds. The question is, what are these patterns? And are they actually patterns? Or does it just appear that they are? Do we imagine that the patterns are holding still? The reality is, if we look, and we can do that right now, we can look and see that what's here is on the move. It would appear to be certainly unstoppably dynamic and ever-changing. So right there are the two perspectives: the apparently definable perspective of fixed, relatively permanent, stable, identifiable phenomena, patterns, and our actual experience, which is ever-changing and ultimately not identifiable phenomena that, in a sense, aren't really phenomena because they're not here long enough to become phenomena. That may sound very strange, but let's actually look at our experience right now. Feel our experience. Every single aspect of it. How long is this moment here for? How long is this perception present? Feel the dynamism, the constancy of this, let's call it this ceaseless movement of what's here. It's ever flowering nature, how it never really becomes something static or fixed because it's in a process, it would seem, of dynamic unfolding and morphing and changing. Feel that. There's just this very smooth, call it a flow. I mean, words are difficult, but I mean, try to hold on and get this moment to just stand still and stop moving and stop becoming and stop transforming. You just can't, we just can't do it. A thought appears, try to hold that in place, try to keep it from morphing. Same with any sensation or feeling or memory or visual image or sound. You see, our ability, our seeming ability to name and define and identify and characterize reality rests upon familiarity with what it is. Something arises, a mental emotional state, let's say. Oh, I know what that is. I recognize it. But the recognition, it depends upon memory. I've seen that before. I know what that is. Now I have a category, a box to put it into. This is fear. This is joy. The pattern is recognizable. I've seen that before. Or you see some object. I've seen that before. It's a cloud, or it's a sunrise, or it's a tree. But we haven't seen this moment before. We haven't seen this instant before. It's new. And then it's new. And then it's new. There's really no box to put the moment into because it's never been before. In that sense, everything is unfamiliar. There's no reference point. It's literally like, I was just listening to sounds of what I would call cars. And it's like two different worlds. They're one world, but it's like two different worlds. I've never heard that sound before. The familiarity of it, hence my naming it as a car sound, is memory. Oh yeah, it's a pattern I recognize. It's a sound. That's my knowledge. What is the sound of a car? That's the sound of a car. But if I come right to the actual experience that has no label on it, experience doesn't have a caption, a label, a sticky note on it. There's no label on it. It's just like raw reality. Even calling it a sound. It's just an encounter with pure, mysterious presence. Yes, I have names for much of what's experienced or some of what's experienced. But I can come back to this raw indescribability of what's here and feel the ever-changing, ever-dynamic, ever-new, indescribable nature of everything that's encountered. Feel that. It's like don't see what it's like to not feel your experience right now as memory. Feel it as actuality right now. You don't actually have memory of this moment because this moment is right now. There is no memory of it. It's immediate. There's no name for this that's here. The names are all memory. The knowledge is all memory. The categories and descriptions are all memory. we're not actually encountering our knowledge. This is a direct encounter with complete newness, with the complete unknown. It's like relating to it as it is, not based on some prior reference point. What is this that's here with no reference points? I can't really describe it, but we could say it's like a easeful, warm flow. This happening that's just here, that's appearing as all these qualities, seemingly nameable and unnameable, and yet owing to its ever flowing, ever dynamic, ever morphing nature, never really landing anywhere, but just in this state of constant unfolding. We can't identify the moment because whatever identity we may come up with vanishes. It's like you identify something, right? There it is. You point to it. Oh, there it is. I've just identified it. And then it's become something else. So the identification isn't actually possible. The names we give things suggest that we've seen them before. That's how we're naming them. But look and see. Have you ever seen this before? Have you ever felt this before? Have you ever perceived this before? Amazing, huh?